Welcome to another lesson of Math 0420 Introductory Algebra. In this video, we will be discussing Section 1.4, Basic Rules of Algebra. In this section, we will understand and use the vocabulary of algebraic expressions. We will use commutative properties, we will use associative properties, we will use the distributive property, we will combine like terms, and we will simplify algebraic expressions. Let's get started. Let's get started with some definitions. First, the terms of an algebraic expression are the parts separated by addition. The numerical part of the term is called coefficient. The parts of each term that are multiplied together are called the factors of the term. And finally, terms that have the same variable factors are called like terms. So we have terms, coefficient, factors of the term, and like terms that have been defined. And one more definition. A term that only has a number in it is called a constant term. Let's do an example. Example number 1. We want to determine the following for the expression 6x plus 2x plus 11. Part A, how many terms are in the expression? Give ourselves a little more room. Part B, what is the coefficient of the first term? C, what is the constant term? And D, what are the like terms in the expression? Okay, so again, our expression is 6x plus 2x plus 11. So to answer part A, how many terms are in the expression? Well, remember that terms are the parts that are separated by addition. So there's 1, 2, 3 terms. We have 3 terms. Part B, what is the coefficient of the first term? Well, if you remember back to the definition, the coefficient is the numerical part of a term. And so this is our first term, and the numerical part of that is 6. Part C, what is the constant term? Well, what does it mean to be constant? Well, a constant is a term that doesn't have a variable. So the only constant we have is 11. And part D, what are the like terms in the expression? Well, those like terms are terms that have the same variable factors. In other words, the variables are multiplied together and they have the same exponent. So our two like terms are 6x and 2x. Let's do another definition. A lot of times we will want to talk about algebraic expressions that have the same value for all values of the overall expression has the same overall value for all replacements. So we say that two algebraic expressions that have the same value for all replacements are called equivalent algebraic expressions. Called equivalent algebraic expressions. Okay, let's now talk about properties of real numbers and algebraic expressions. Properties of real numbers and algebraic expressions. Okay, definition. We want to let A and B be real numbers, variables, or algebraic expressions. Then A plus B equals B plus A. That's true in all cases, which is called the commutative property of addition. And A times B is equal to B times A, which is the commutative property of multiplication. And so what this says is that for any two real numbers, variables, or algebraic expressions, that we can change the order of the addition A plus B is the same as B plus A, and we can change the order of the multiplication. A times B equals B times A. So in other words, 3 plus 2 and 2 plus 3 are the same, just like 3 times 2 and 2 times 3 are the same. Okay, so those are the commutative properties of addition and multiplication. Let's now add definitions for the associative properties. The associative properties. So, definition. Let A, B, and C be real numbers, variables, or algebraic expressions. Then A plus B, the quantity A plus B plus C, is equal to A plus the quantity B plus C, which is the associative property of addition. In other words, you can group and associate addition in any way you want, and it still stays the same. You still get the same result. So in other words, 1 plus 2, that quantity, plus 3, is the same as 1 plus the quantity 2 plus 3. And A times B, that quantity times C, is the same as A times the quantity B times C, which is the associative property of multiplication. In other words, you can reassociate multiplication with grouping symbols and get the same result as well. Let's try an example. Example number 2. We want to simplify. We want to simplify using the properties we've just discussed. Part A. 8 plus the quantity 12 plus x. Okay, can we simplify that? Well, the first thing we can do is we can reassociate and change that to 8 plus 12 plus x using the associative property of addition. And then we can evaluate what's inside the parentheses. 8 plus 12 is 20 plus x. B. 6 times 5x. How can we simplify that? Well, we can reassociate the multiplication as 6 times 5 times x using the associative property of multiplication. And then 6 times 5 we can evaluate as 30, and we end up with 30x. Okay? So now we've talked about the commutative and the associative properties. Let's now move on and talk about the distributive property. The distributive property. Definition. Let A, B, and C represent real numbers, variables, or algebraic expressions. Then what we have is A times the quantity B plus C is equal to A times B plus A times C. In other words, multiplication distributes over addition. So we take A and multiply times B, and then A and multiply times C, and we get AB plus AC. That's the distributive property. Let's try another example. All right, example number 3. We want to multiply. Okay, so we have 6 times 4y plus 7. How do we distribute? Well, we take the 6 and distribute to the 4y. We get 6 times 4, which is 24y. And then we do 6 times 7. And 6 times 7 is 42. So you take the outside number and you distribute it to each part. And you multiply the coefficients together and keep the variables. And then you multiply the constant and the 6 together and get 42. Let's now talk about combining like terms. Combining like terms. Okay, example number 4. We want to combine like terms. So part A, 7x plus 3x. The way we can look at this is through the lens of the distributive property. So that's the same thing as saying 7 plus 3 times x. Well, 7 plus 3 is 10, so we get 10x. Notice that the power on x is the same. We have x to the 1 power in both cases, so we can just add the coefficients. That's what we're really seeing. Is 7x plus 3x is 10x. Part B. Let's do a subtraction problem. So 9a minus 4a. Again, using the distributive property, we can rewrite that with the coefficients on the outside. So 9 minus 4 times a. Or we can just subtract the coefficients. 9 minus 4. So 9 minus 4 is 5. And we're left with 5a. Okay, now that we've talked about commutative, associative, distributive properties, and combining like terms, let's now talk about using all of those things to simplify algebraic expressions and the steps for doing so. Simplifying algebraic expressions. Step 1. We want to use the distributive property to remove parentheses. Then we want to rearrange terms and group like terms using the commutative and associative properties. And that's the associative properties of addition and multiplication. And then our last step is to combine like terms by combining the coefficients of the terms and keeping the same variable factor. Okay, let's try an example. Example number 5, we want to simplify. We want to simplify the algebraic expression 7 times 2x plus 3 plus 11x. Now the first thing we want to do is we want to distribute to get rid of those parentheses, so we can distribute the 7 to the 2x. 7 times 2x is 14x, and then we distribute the 7 to the 3, and we get 7 times 3, which is 21, plus 11x. Then we can rearrange using the commutative and associative properties. So we can rearrange this to be 14x plus 11x plus 21 using the commutative property of addition. And now we can combine like terms. 14x plus 11x, we add those coefficients, 14 plus 11. 14 plus 11 is 25. We retain the original variable factor, which is just x, plus 21. The constant stays the same, and that is justified by combining like terms. Okay, and that is our simplified result. Let's do one more example. Example number 6. We want to simplify yet again. Okay, this time we have 7 times the quantity 4x plus 3y plus 2 times the quantity 5x plus y. Okay, in this case, again, we want to use the distributive property first. We get 7 times 4x, so 28x. 7 times 3y, which is plus 21y. And then we move to the second term, and we take the 2 and distribute to the 5x, so that's 10x, and 2 times y, which is plus 2y. Now we can rearrange using the commutative property in this case. So we can rewrite that as 28x plus 10x plus 21y plus 2y. That's the commutative property of addition. Combine like terms by adding coefficients with the same variables. So 28x plus 10x, those are the same type of animal. So 28 plus 10 is 38, and we retain our variable factor x. And then 21y plus 2y is 21 plus 2, which is 23y. So that's our fully simplified result after combining like terms. That is the conclusion of section 1.4, Basic Rules of Algebra. Good luck on your homework. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next one.